Hello and welcome to Story Time. Today I will be continuing with my absolute favorite book, Redwall, by Mr. Brian Jacques. Chapter 19. It was difficult to tell who was the more surprised, Matthias and his party, or the rat sentries. There was a second's pause, then they scattered. One or two of the rats were a bit slow off the mark, but not as slow as Colin Vole and his mother, who were roughly grabbed by the faster sentries. Matthias dodged, wriggled, and ran free, tripping a rat who was about to seize Mr. Vole. The young mouse ran, pushing the vole in front of him and calling out, "Run! Keep going, Mr. Vole! Try to make it to the woods and hide!" The vole faltered. "But my wife, Colin, the rats have got them." Matthias pushed him roughly forward. "They'll get you too if you don't hurry. Move yourself, Vole. You'll be in no good to your family as a prisoner again." Taking Matthias's advice, Abram Vole ran as fast as his legs would carry him. Matthias turned and picked up a heavy branch. He faced the oncoming rats. "Only a dozen of you," he taunted. "Let's see what you rats are made of. First come, first served." Matthias swung the branch. It whooshed through the air, causing the rats to stop in their tracks. As he advanced on them, flailing the branch, he shouted at the top of his lungs, "Basil! Basil, Stag, Hare, where are you?" The rats tried to circle Matthias. One got too near. A hefty blow from the improvised staff sent him crashing to the ground. "Oh, well hit, sir! Jolly well hit!" It was the hare. He came bounding up, for all the world as if he were on a Sunday school picnic, grinning from ear to ear. Colin and Mrs. Vole came panting in his wake. Matthias gasped with relief. "Oh, Basil, where in heaven's name did you get to?" The skillful creature dodged a rat, spun around, and landed a fierce double-footed kick to its stomach. The rat bowled over, completely winded, all the fight knocked out of its body. Basil chuckled. "Oh, sorry about that, Matthias, me old lad. When these chaps gave up chasing me, I scooted back to my den. Spring cleaning, you know. A bit late, but I'm only a bachelor in single quarters, what?" Matthias was flabbergasted. Here he was, fighting off a dozen rats, trying to rescue the Vole family, while Basil was dusting out his den. The young mouse could scarcely hold his temper. "Oh, how nice of you, Mr. Hare. So glad you could join us," he said sarcastically as they beat off rats and hurried the voles along. "I don't suppose you put the kettle on for tea." Basil bowed to Mrs. Vole and offered her his paw. "Allow me, Mom." "Why, yes, as a matter of fact, I did. Nothing like a fresh pot of mint tea after some good healthy exercise. What? Matthias struck a rat square in the face with the butt of his branch. The hare was obviously insane. Mint tea, indeed. "Oh, well, I don't suppose you think I'm going to sit in your den drinking tea all afternoon," he yelled. Basil had a hammerlock on a rat. He swung him and knocked two more flat on the ground. He winked at Matthias. "Oh, I certainly hope not, old Dean. You see, it'd be perishin' awkward, as I've only got a four-piece tea set, and if I'm not mistaken, the small gent who took off for the woods like a scalded duck is obviously the husband of this delightful Lady Vole, so I'd have to invite him too, won't I?" Matthias tripped a rat with the branch. He was learning to take Basil in his stride. "Oh, why, of course you will, Mr. Hare. What a bore you must think me. I'll probably sit around in the common here and teach the rats to make daisy chains." Basil dodged around a rat and laughed approvingly. "Oh, no need to get uppity, young feller. I thought I'd best shelter the voles and see 'em safe to the Abbey later. Obviously, you need to get back to Redwall post-haste. A family of voles would only slow you up." Matthias grinned ruefully. "I apologize, sir. I accept your offer of help gratefully. I did not mean to be rude." By now, they were at the edge of the common land. The rats had fallen back momentarily. Basil shook paws with Matthias. "Oh, good mouse. Right, cut along, young'un. I'll see you when I deliver my charges back to the Abbey." Alone and unencumbered, Matthias struck off into the woods. Traveling doggedly on wearied legs, he realized that his entry to Redwall would probably have to be from the Mossflower side, as the main gate would probably be under attack. Could the defenders hold out? Was Constance organizing the retaliation correctly without him? Had the sentries stayed alert? Was Cornflower safe? Questions raced through Matthias's brain as he fought his way through the undergrowth. Taking a check at his bearings, he began to worry a little. The abbey walls should be in sight over towards the northwest. Perhaps he had... Perhaps he hadn't fully realized the sprawling size of the woodlands. Yes, that was it. Maybe if he kept on trekking, the walls would soon come into view. From somewhere ahead, Matthias could hear the trickle and gurgle of a stream. He remembered that it had been some time since he had eaten and drunk. Changing direction, he followed the water sounds until he came to the banks of the stream. Lying face down on a low outcrop of red sandstone, Matthias drank his fill of the cool, sweet stream water. Further down the bank, he found some young dandelions. Gathering a bunch of tender leaves and buds, he made his way back to the sun-warmed sandstone and stretched out on his back, nibbling dandelions and gazing up at the cloudless blue June sky through the treetops. What an action-packed day it had been. Matthias was glad of the brief respite after all the excitement, but he told himself that he could not afford to stay long. He must press on to Redwall. He heaved a great sigh. The life of a warrior was very tiring. Closing his eyes momentarily, he thought of Martin the warrior. Did he ever feel tired? He must have, defending the abbey with his large heavy sword, wearing all that armor. Whatever happened to that sword? It had to be somewhere. Legendary weapons didn't just rust away to nothing, otherwise they'd never get to be legends. A dragonfly hovered directly above the young creature, gently stirring his whiskers. What was this strange creature doing in his territory? He glided a little closer. It was quite safe. The oddly garbed animal posed no threat to his authority as bailiff of this stretch of water. He was fast asleep, snoring like a squirrel in midwinter, oblivious to all about him. Chapter 20. It was late afternoon. There had been one or two minor setbacks, but Clooney and his squad had finally made it up into the elm tree. Some of the rats were really hopeless climbers in Clooney's estimation. There had been quite a bit of jostling and slipping, and as for that idiot cheese thief, imagine until you were 6 yards above ground to find you were afraid and had no head for heights. Clooney thought angrily that if there hadn't been such an urgent need for silence, he'd have given them what for. The warlord began to wish that he had brought along more ferrets and weasels. They possessed good natural climbing ability, and that weasel, what was his name, Scrag, he'd been an enormous help, boosting and encouraging the others, even organizing lifting up the plank. Clooney had made a mental note for future reference. Officer material, that one. Despite all efforts, however, they were still below the edge of the parapet. Higher up, the elm branches became thin and whippy, not strong enough to support the plank's weight. Clooney took stock of the situation. This was really as far as he could go while still retaining some kind of safety factor on their hazardous assignment. He decided to call a halt. Right, take a breather. Find somewhere that you won't fall from. In an hour or two it'll be evening. There'll be lots of shadow and less daylight. The mice will have slowed up a bit by then. We'll catch them off guard. Scrag! See this lot keep still and quiet, will you? Scrag saluted smartly and offered a helpful comment. This branch I'm sitting on, Chief. I've just been testing it, and it feels good and strong. Maybe we should mount the plank from here to the wall. It'll reach easily enough. I know it's a bit of an uphill climb, but that shouldn't be too difficult. I don't fancy those branches higher up. They're too thin. Clooney climbed across and sat next to Scrag. He spoke in a whisper. Good thinking, Weasel. Yes, this branch will do fine. Stick by me, Scrag. You're a useful soldier. With some of the blockheads I've got around me, I could be on the lookout for a new captain soon. You know what that means? Extra loot, A bigger share of the plunder. Clooney always rewards initiatives, Crag. Play your cards right and they'll soon get promotion. Oh, thanks, Chief. Don't worry, I won't let you down, Scrag murmured. On a lower branch, Cheese Thief, who had been eavesdropping on the conversation, sneered inwardly. Yes, Chief. No, Chief. 3 bags full, Chief. Who did that snotty weasel think he was? And as for Clooney promoting a weasel to captain over rats of his own kind, well, Redtooth and Darkclaw and the others might have something to say about that. Upstart weasel, he'd only joined up a day or two. If he got half the chance, Cheese Thief would fix Scrag all right. Abbot Mortimer looked thankfully up at the sky. Evening had come. They had lasted out well. The rats had not breached the wall in any way. Most of the main fighting had gone into a lull. Clooney's horde was only making spasmodic sallies from the ditch now. Taking advantage of the interval, the defenders hauled up more rocks and rubble to the ramparts. Cornflower and her band of helpers were on top of the walls. Keeping their heads low, they marched from post to post, serving each creature with a bowl of stew, some wild grapes, and a small loaf of honeyed nut bread. Oh, what a calm, efficient young mouse Cornflower is, the abbot remarked to Constance. The badger passed a bundle of arrows to Ambrose Spike for distribution as she replied, Aye, that she is, Father Abbot, but she looks worried. Matthias, do you think? Oh, doubtless, said the abbot dryly. That young mouse is on my mind as well as hers and yours. Constance shook her large, striped head. It's not like Matthias to go off like that. I've searched everywhere in my spare moments, but he's not in the abbey. Well, wherever he is, the abbot replied, I'm certain that he is helping our cause. So we'll just have to await his return and trust to Matthias's judgment and good sense. The two friends thankfully accepted food from Cornflower and her helpers. Both watched, mystified, as Winfred the Otter and Fourmole hoisted and pulled a seesaw into view. It was a plaything, made in the distant past for the use of infant woodlanders. It had lain near the strawberry patch for as long as anyone could remember. Baby animals played on it throughout the year. As a seesaw, it was in perfect working order. Winifred and Fourmole sat it down on the parapet. Bent double, 2 moles staggered up, carrying between them an enormous rock. Fourmole indicated the opposite end of the seesaw. Put 'em there. That's a nice boulder, me beauties. When the boulder was in position, Winfred and Fourmole hugged each other tightly. With a nod, they jumped heavily on the near seat. Whoosh! The big rock catapulted over the top of the parapet. Several seconds of silence followed. Then there was a crash, accompanied by screams of pain and shock from the rats packed into the ditch below. Winfred and Fourmole gravely shook paws. Yeah, I reckon they pesky varmints got an headache, chuckled Fourmole, as everybody in the ramparts ran to seek cover from the retaliatory missiles hurled by Clooney's horde. The battle had started again in earnest. Mouse archers sprang up and loosed their shafts down towards the ditch. Otter sling throwers whipped hard pebbles off with fierce rapidity. Long rat javelins flew upward, causing death and injury in the ranks of the defenders. But now there was a new hazard. Some inventive rat had devised a fearsome weapon. Chunks of iron grave railings from the churchyard strung to lengths of cord. The rats would swing the cord round and round, gaining momentum until, judging the right direction, they loosed the cord. The missiles sped upwards, 2 or 3 times higher than the wall, almost out of sight. Then they would plummet downwards, whistling viciously, to burst on the ramparts. Any defender struck by a missile was either instantly killed or horribly maimed. Even if the iron missed its target, the stones and shattered metal fragments ricocheted about dangerously. Realizing the danger of this new device, Constance ordered all but a chosen few to leave the wall for the safety of the abbey grounds. However, the strung iron bits soon proved to be a 2-edged weapon. Many that were released wrongly came hurling back down into the ditch, sometimes slaying the very creatures that had hurled them. Even Redtooth in Clooney's armor, guarding the standard in the meadow, had to make an undignified scurry to avoid being hit. But he could see the demoralizing effect the missiles were having on the defenders, so he ordered the throwers to continue. Constance bravely stood her ground on the parapet, as did her small band of picked fighters. Whenever one of the missiles landed intact on the rubble pile, she would seize it, standing in full view as she whirled the corded iron round and round, releasing it in a blur of speed. Constance was a far more powerful and accurate thrower than any rat. The attackers bared angry fangs at her from the cover of the ditch. Of all the Redwall defenders, the big badger was the one they most hated and feared. Seated in the branch of the elm tree at the north wall of the abbey, Clooney watched the shadows lengthen. To the west, the sky was crimson with sunset. Soon he would raise the plank to the parapet. Then let them beware. No tin-pot order of mice was going to stand against the might of Clooney the Scourge. Methuselah, the gatehouse keeper, stood facing the damaged tapestry in the great hall of Redwall. Being too old for active battle service, he reasoned that the best way he could serve his order was by putting his fertile brain to work. Somewhere there had to be at least a clue, a single lead that might tell him where the resting place of Martin the Warrior could be found, or where he could regain possession of the ancient sword for his abbey. But where? Every now and then, over the years, Methuselah had searched through Redwall for Martin and his sword. Now he stepped up his questing activities, alas, with no success. Vital clues and answers still eluded him. What he needed was a younger, fresher mind to assist him. What a pity that Matthias could not be found. Now there was a young mouse with a head on his shoulders. Long years and much mental strain had taken their toll on the ancient mouse. Wearily he swayed on his feet, and putting out a paw to steady himself, he touched the wall, the exact patch of stone over which Martin's likeness had once hung. Methuselah gave a sigh of satisfaction and allowed a small smile to creep across his features. His search had not been in vain. Beneath his paw there was writing carved into the dust-covered wall. And that is the end of part 1. And we shall continue next time.